Hi, welcome to this week's edition of News Talk. Again, John Dave and myself. Going to look back over a couple of Lazarus-like performances and, of course, Ireland's victory against England last weekend. So, lads, we kick off with Ireland first. 32-18 against the old enemy. Incredible performance, far better than I think most of us were expecting. But two brilliantly taken tries.
Yeah, I think most of us were expecting that as the Six Nations wore on, that England would get better and better as their Saracens players integrated into international rugby, and by the time the last game came along, they'd be using us as a duster. And I've certainly been apprehensive coming up to it. But yeah, we proved them wrong. It was a great performance. I mean, okay, neither ourselves nor England were playing for anything exciting. But we were playing for not coming fifth, I suppose. We could still come fourth, but it'd be unlikely enough set of circumstances. I think we'd need Scotland to win and France to get a losing bonus point and yada yada yada. But the game itself was just one of those games that you just love to see. You don't beat England. We don't beat England by a huge amount very often. I think, was it 2007 was the last time we put as many points on them? Normally, if we beat them, it's by a score. So to beat them emphatically and to beat them slowing down in third gear towards the end of the game was even better. It's those games you can really enjoy where you're going to win 20 minutes out or whatever. And even when Bundee Aki got sin binned, there was only a very slight kind of they could come back here. It wasn't really a situation where you were desperately worried.
I think that actually you raise an interesting point there, John, because whatever about the Ireland performance, we're going to talk about that. England can't be happy with the performance, particularly after Bundee Aki's red card. They never, even with the extra man, they never looked particularly threatening. And we were always able to keep them at arm's length, and Johnny was able to pick off points with penalties. Which is great game management, as he said. England, as you say, I mean, we thought by the time they got into this stage of the season, the Saracens players would have played a couple of games of rugby. They wouldn't be as match unsharp as they had been at the beginning, and that they'd be ready to hit the ground running. And it was Ireland were the team that looked like they'd had the steady progression over the course of the season, not Saracens. I think one thing that struck me was how kind of Ireland went back to first principles, or if you like, Joe Schmidt's first principles of precision. Everything we did was precise. Our clean outs were precise. We didn't allow players didn't allow themselves to get dragged into rucks. Didn't allow themselves to get dragged out of position. Robbie Henshaw outside centre ran the defensive line brilliantly. He's a superb outside centre. He really is. Johnny Sexton and Conor Murray rolled back the years, although Sexton's had been having a good Six Nations anyway. But I think that put the cap on it, and Conor Murray kind of reminded us of the player that he certainly was. Whether he can do that on a sustained basis, that's the open question. But then you had guys like, I mean, the pack dominated England's pack. Our back row dominated England's back row, and it all flowed from there. I mean, Ty Furlong had a meme-worthy game.
It seemed that everything that could go wrong did go wrong for England. They had a very strong opening few minutes. They didn't convert any of that pressure into points. And then, there was certain moments in the match, like you mentioned Robbie Henshaw, he was coming in and making enormous tackles and winning balls in the air. Even it's been highlighted, Tadhg Beirne getting in behind, pulling in the lifter into the line out, so that it created a situation where they were offside, even though it was him that created, that sort of tricks the referee. That kind of cleared pressure when they were in our 22, or when we held them up over the line, things like that, when there could have been a penalty against us. Like I thought we got an enormous amount of luck in that game. But I suppose you make your own luck. But we just got a lot of the vital decisions went our way. Even they won a scrum penalty, and they decided to go for another scrum, and then we got a scrum penalty back, and like that is such a huge psychological dent to when you're the attacking team, and a huge fill up when you're defending. Like you saw the reaction of Furlong when that happened. He was like,
meme city it is now.
Yeah.
When your man tells you you're getting a takeaway.
Well, you see, what Ireland did is they kind of created a picture for the referee who was referees like teams who are aggressive and progressive and are going forward and look to be attempting at least to stay within the laws. And Ireland created that picture for the referee. So that any 50-50 calls, he's kind of thinking, well, for the last hour, Ireland have been doing this, this, and this is what I want them to do. So they must have been doing it still. So let's give them that penalty. Referee management is a very important part of the game, and it's something I thought we did really, really well. Obviously, Johnny Sexton won't agree with regards to the Genge thing, but I thought we played both the opposition and the referee very well.
What did you think of that Genge decision? Like, it did look like he was pummeling him with his elbow, didn't it?
Totally. I was surprised it didn't get a red card or a citing.
It was weird on a number of levels. First of all, the TMO, obviously, the TMO has access to more angles than we have, and all we saw was kind of a side of frame thing of it. So, don't know. When the TMO didn't refer it to the ref, when Johnny Sexton mentioned to the ref, he wasn't inclined to talk to the TMO, and then there was no citing. It was a very weird one.
Well, maybe it's one of those things that the angle we saw it from made it look worse. Maybe it didn't connect in the way that it looked to connect. I don't know. But like you say, they've got more angles than we have. So
England's discipline was really bad. I think they conceded 17 penalties.
Yeah.
Like, as I heard somebody saying, like that's would have been a season of penalties under Joe Schmidt.
But you don't expect a team with the players. You don't expect a team with the likes of Maro Itoje, the Vunipolas, Owen Farrell, Elliot Daly, guys who are leaders. Ben Youngs. You wouldn't expect a team like that to be so ill disciplined for so long in the context of a game, and they really, really were. There was no. They started off. It started going downhill for them in terms of discipline in the fifth minute, and it didn't get better for the remaining 75 minutes. And you'd expect a team with that amount of experience, with that amount of achievement, that the players will kind of go, "Hang on a second, lads, we have to kind of refocus here and stop giving away stupid penalties." But they continue to give away penalties, and we continue to pick them up.
Yeah, well, the man you mentioned, Ellis Genge, is a bit of a penalty.
Well, he's a penalty machine anyway.
He's a bit of a hothead. You've got a Itoje who plays on the limit, is what you'd say about him. He's a kind of a Richie McCaw-like play on the limit type player. He strays over the limits sometimes, but that's what you want from a guy like that. If you're an England fan, he's world class. Well, he is world class, even if you're not an England fan. But he's known for that kind of thing, so that can always yield a few penalties if it goes against you. Genge is just a hothead. Sinclair actually, I think, has calmed down a bit, but he certainly has been a hothead in his past in a past life, shall we say.
He can be a reliable source of penalties a lot of the time.
Yeah, so that's three of your pack that are in around the ball all the time that can yield penalties. So if you're not having a good day penalty wise, and the head gets in your head, and it gets in the referee's head even more, it can go badly for you. That's where those kind of players, they can win. It's a bit like your man, Finn Russell. They can win or lose you a game sometimes.
I agree with all that. But what surprised me was that England didn't appear to attempt to do anything about it, even appear to attempt to do anything about it. I remember we were playing Claremont in the Aviva. Leinster were playing Claremont in the Aviva, and Wayne Barnes was killing us at the scrum, absolutely killing us, because they were the Claremont front row were taking a loose bind, and that was allowing Mike Ross to slip through, and we were getting done for collapsing scrum time after time. And even though Mike Ross was still in good shape and could still have gone further, Leinster decided to take him off. to try and present to the referee a picture that, okay, we're aware we have this problem. This is how we're going to fix it. England didn't appear to necessarily work for Leinster, but England didn't even try to do anything like that. They didn't try to change the picture for the referee. They kept doing the stupid things from minute 5, as I say, right through to the final whistle.
Yeah. Sometimes it just goes like that. Sometimes you have those days and everything you try turns to shit, you know. But like you say,
Yeah, you would have to question Eddie's selection, though. I mean, like, to continually pick, like, they were beaten already in 2 of their matches going into our game, and then they continued to pick the guys from Saracens who had very, very little rugby. And even like he took off Mako at halftime. You know, Farrell didn't look like the old Farrell until obviously he got a head knock. You know, Elliot Daly looks a shadow of himself. And, you know, even the amount of pressure that they put on to Ford, he looked a very average player.
Yeah, it's well, there's a couple of things. Like, England under Stuart Lancaster, maybe a little bit like Ireland under Joe Schmidt, seem to have a reputation of being too honest for their own good, or too honest is the wrong word, but too you know, Eddie's team is more of a nasty kind of vibe to it. It's more kind of, yeah, we're going to smash you guys attitude, rather than we're going to play rugby of the good.
And that's what Jones actually said. And about a couple of years ago, he said, you know, we're going to keep our foot on your throats, sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. So that, as I say, that attitude can win you games, but it can also spill over and lose you games and through ill discipline. So, you know, you got to take the rough with the smooth when you run over a team with that attitude, and you keep, like you say, you keep the foot on their throat and keep pushing. You know, that's a different vibe to somebody who's trying to just win with wonderful rugby. Like Joe Schmidt's teams, for example, you mentioned it earlier, keep the penalties down, you know, win the game by not giving away penalties was a part of their strategy. Stuart Lancaster will be a bit like that as well. He's kind of, you know, comfortable in chaos. Let's try and, it's all about trying to create openings, trying to win the game by doing something amazing, rather than trying to win the game by just being an absolute nightmare. And like, that's the great beauty of rugby. There's both strategy, and, you know, the best teams will be able to do both. Like, the All Blacks can take you into a corner and kick the crap out of you, or they can, you know, play rugby of the gods and make you look stupid, you know. And that's kind of the beauty of rugby. Some days the big beasts knock the shit out of the little skinny fellas, and some days the little skinny fellas run around the big beasts and make them look stupid. So
you mentioned Jones. Jones, there are a lot of questions, certainly in the English media anyway, about Jones and his selections and stuff like that. I mean, to a certain extent, it's a bit outcome driven in that if he'd beaten Ireland, he would have been right to stick with those Saracens players to try and play them back into form and try and play them back into shape. He didn't, so obviously he was wrong to do that. Is the message? It's hard to know. I mean, like, we all thought, we said ourselves, obviously we're not the greatest rugby minds on the planet, although, you know, we thought at the beginning of the season that's what he was going to do. He was going to play the Saracens guys back into form, back into fitness, and it didn't work out. I mean, Billy Vunipola didn't look appreciably sharper against Ireland than he did against Scotland, or fitter. You know, he was been taken out of it by backs during the match. You know, which normally, like anytime we've played a team containing Billy Vunipola, whether it's Saracens or England, he's always been a huge worry. How do you stop Billy Vunipola? On last week, it was like, well, sure, we let somebody stop him. It doesn't matter who. And anyone's going to be able to stop him. Get Craig Casey on. He'll stop him. Well, you know, because he's, I mean that because he's tired. Peter Stringer could stop him at this stage. You know, he's just not what he is. And to a certain extent, you have to look at Jones now, because he's the guy who stuck with that selection. He's the guy who made that selection policy. And it's not like England are short of talented back row players or short of talented number 8s. Okay, they had a bad injury during the tournament. From a guy who could potentially have been a replacement for Vunipola. But at the same time, they did very, very little progressive. He did very little. I mean, England did not look a threat until Ireland were down to 13 men, and even then only barely. and that's
Hmm.
that's something he'd have to be questioned, and he has been questioned. I mean, they got to a World Cup final kind of out-taught and out-muscled by South Africa. Now, whatever about being out-muscled by South Africa, being out-taught by a South African, it's not the greatest look, So he's been on a losing kind of wicket ever since then, and this is just more grist to the mill.
Well, I have to say that international rugby, as we've said many times here, is conservative by nature, and it's harder to get out of an international team sometimes than get into one. So when you've got everybody criticized Joe Schmidt for having his favorites and having his players. It's a kind of having your players that have never let you down. And, I'd say as far as Eddie Jones is concerned, Billy Vunipola, Micah Vunipola, Maro Itoje, Owen Farrell, they're all guys who A, are world-class, and B, have never let them down. And the fact that they haven't played any rugby because they're in the fucking championship would give you a pause, but it obviously didn't give. He obviously thought he could get around that, and in the end he didn't. And like you say, it's outcome driven. So
somewhat ironically, I think Maro Itoje has been one of England's better players during the tournament. It's not his fault that people didn't fall in behind, as it were. I thought he played particularly well, actually, in some of the games. So
it was just the Welsh game. I think he conceded all those penalties, wasn't it?
He got caught quite badly. His timing was very badly off in that Welsh game, and he got coffered.
But the other 4 games, he certainly played as good as he used to play, let's say.
Yeah.
But no, I was going to say, but you have to sort of admire the way we've kind of changed our tactics. For a long time, we always went up the line to try and get that try. And sometimes it worked and it paid off, and we got the points. But this time I just thought we were a lot smarter. We took our points, we kept separation between the score line between us and England. Sexton got 8 kicks, 2 of them were conversions, but he got 6 penalties, and he just kept that scoreboard ticking along, and making every moment we were in their half and we get an opportunity to score, we took the score, and we just kept that. And I suppose it comes down, they obviously are very, they must put a lot of faith in their own ability to defend. And if you think about it, we were down, it was only when Bundy went off that they actually crossed the line. One, I thought Stockdale could have done a little bit better. He seemed to go for the interception. And the other one, Keenan, had no other option. I think they were down to 13 at that stage.
Yeah, it was kind of a 3-on-1.
I mean, he almost got a kind of a foot on the guy's ankle, but it was an impossible task, really. But my point is that Ireland were confident that they didn't need to have 7-7-7 all the time. They were happy to take 3-3-3, knowing that they could trust their defence when England did try to attack them.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. I mean, that's if you're only if you take 3 all the time and your opponent takes 0, then you win the match. And it was the last game of the season. It was a game against England. It was a game that, I mean, it might have been different if we were chasing a championship and bonus points came into it. Then you might see a different attitude, but we weren't. Yeah. It was a game against England at home where if we won 6-5, then we would have been still, the team would have been lauded, for want of a better phrase. Perhaps not lauded, but certainly been praised, because the different games have different motivations within the games, excluding the larger picture of a tournament. There are miniature kind of battles within games, and England and Ireland is one of those. So all that mattered was the win, and the way they did it was really I mean, it was I said last week that Ireland are one of the worst teams to watch, probably the worst professional team to watch on the island. They turned it around last weekend. They were superb to watch. It was a really good game to watch. They played really, really well. You could see what they were trying to do. I mean, I'd criticize Mike Catt in that I couldn't see any kind of shape or pattern to his attack that was slightly different. I mean, okay, he went back into the old Leinster and Osprey's playbook for the best move, but that's okay. I mean, as I think it was I don't know who it was, but said all art is theft and great art is steal. So that's what he did, and it was a great move, and it worked out really, really well. So no harm with that. And guys who had been rising in terms of form. I mean, Keith Earl started off the season not that great, the Six Nations tournament, when I've been getting better and better and better all through. You can see him improving game on game. until obviously the England game, final game, best performance. It's kind of what you want.
Could have scored one of the greatest tries ever seen in
Yeah,
Lansdowne
yeah.
Road if only Henderson hadn't, or
Yeah,
Henderson hadn't knocked it on. But
he was very
unfortunately,
unfortunate there
he,
because it was an
he
amazing
showed
finish.
a fantastic finish. And like you have to admire as well. Like I was talking to someone yesterday just about Jack Conan's try, and like we were kind of talking about CJ, and it been obviously he's been a great servant for Ireland over the last 50 odd caps that he's got. But I don't think that CJ would have scored that type of try if he had been in Conan's position. He's not that. He's
not that kind of a number 8.
He's not that kind of guy that just sees what's in front of him and plays the opportunity. It's very much color by numbers. That would have been another ruck. That would have been another set.
That's why I always say that I think CJ's a better 6 than an 8. His instincts lie more in that direction. His natural style of play. And I think, he's been very, very good this Six Nations. Don't get me wrong, playing at what I consider out of position. He's been very, very good. But I don't think it's any surprise that his best game was against England, where he played in what I consider to be his best position. Because he looked, I said it last week, people look at CJ and they go, oh, he's making so many carries, but he's not making much yardage. And they reduce it down to just a number. Whereas you have to look at, okay, he makes that carry and he might only make, a yard or not even a yard, but he takes 3 or 4 guys in. And that's what he was doing. He was taking all of England's fringe defence in every time he made a carry, and it made space for those outside him. And if you've got a guy like Jack Conan who's a bit more mobile, got better feet, all he needs is a little bit of space.
Yeah.
Yep.
So anyway, we've ended off our season on a high, which was great. Just going to talk about the French Wales game. Like that was.
By the way, next time somebody tells you that Six Nations is rubbish, beat them over the head with a videotape of last Saturday. It was brilliant, wasn't it? Just it was absolutely from start to finish. It was a great day's rugby.
Yeah. Like I mentioned a Lazarus-like performance. Well, the first moment of rising back from the dead was when France were down 20-30 with 20 minutes to go. Bigger had just kicked a penalty. France had conceded the yellow, and then they got a red on 66 minutes, and they were still it was only with 10 minutes to go. They were 10 points down. They had a yellow and a red against them, and to show that determination to come back was phenomenal. The amount of times, if France had had that kind of determination over the last 50 years, imagine how many Grand Slams and championships they would have won.
Indeed.
Well, that's France for you. You never know what you're going to get. It was a brilliant game of rugby. We could do an episode of Blues Talk about each half, never mind the whole game, because it was just so much happening, so much good stuff from both teams, as we said. I thought Wales were, but what and everybody I've spoken to since, people who don't really watch a lot of rugby, right? Who watch the Six Nations because it's on. The thing they all said about having watched that game, what a great game was, is they were delighted Wales lost because they were so cynical in the last 20 minutes. If the non-dedicated rugby fan notices that, then you can be damn sure a referee's going to notice it.
Yeah,
you know what
exactly.
I mean? If they've noticed that Wales were if the man on the street knows that Wales have been cynical, they were slowing the ball down, they were giving away penalties, they were doing stuff deliberately, you can be damn sure a referee will notice it. And the referee did notice it, and he punished them accordingly. I don't think Wales went to be cynical. I think what Wales did was they saw, a grand slam in their sights. There were 10 points up, as you say, with 10 minutes left, and they retracted within themselves. They got the fear, and they started doing silly things that you do when you're afraid.
They did that against Ireland. They did that against Ireland in the last minute. Do you remember they had an opportunity, and they gave away in the French game. They gave away a stupid penalty and gave the impetus back to France. Allowed France to get back into their 22 and attack them.
Somebody said fear is the little death, and that's what Wales someone you could see it. Maybe now, in fairness, this is a relatively inexperienced Welsh team compared to some of them. Some Welsh teams have been, Warren's dad's army. Younger players, new players in that team, and maybe they're inexperienced told in that, Wales teams, when they get into a position to win a Grand Slam, generally win a Grand Slam. On Saturday they didn't, which is unusual for a Welsh team. I think that, I don't want to use the two words. I don't want to use bottle because I don't agree. Anyone who steps on the rugby pitch is brave. Two, chokers. They didn't choke. They were it was 10 minutes to go in a Six Nations season in which they'd won every single game. They didn't choke, but what they did was they let the momentous nature of the occasion get to them, and they withdrew within themselves.
Agree. Yeah, so that's kind of result, obviously, with the Scotland beating Italy, leaves the table kind of a bit precarious still at the moment, because we don't know who's going to win. Obviously, France have to take on Scotland today, Friday. Yeah. So, obviously, a win for France will put them. Obviously, they need a bonus point to take the title. Scotland win with a bonus point, they leapfrog us. So we're not sure what we could either go third or fourth in the table. But hopefully, France
9-0
win.
to Scotland would suit us nicely.
Okay. Well, let's see how it turns out anyway.
I don't think it's going to be 9-0.
No, I don't. So
I have to say that when I started watching that game, I was hoping the Welsh would get a Grand Slam. A, because they were the only ones who could. B, because they started the tournament in such shit form. And, there was the famous, who was it off the ball, who wrote them off before the first game and said they were absolute shite and they hadn't a chance against Ireland. So I was kind of, with my underdog hat on, was rooting for them to do it. But as the game wore on, like you said, Dave, they just didn't deserve to win it in the end. So I kind of supported them up until about 60 minutes, and then the tide turned for me. So yeah,
You're saying that's what happened, John? You were channeling all the energy towards them, and then once you withdrew it.
I'm not Uri Geller,
He won't be able to show his face in Cardiff again for a long time.
Upside to everything. But in terms of what we want to happen, do we want Wales to win the tournament, or do we want France to go mad? And we obviously want France to win the game against Scotland because that will make sure we stay third. But do we want the French to win the championship or not? I suppose is the question.
Well, I'm speaking as with my Leinster hat on. I'd rather that the tournament was won by a Pro 14 nation.
Yeah.
I mean, it brings kudos on the league and it shows the strength of the league. I don't want to finish third. I want to finish second.
Well, it'll take a funny set of circumstances to make us come third. Or sorry, to make us come fourth, but it'll take an even funnier set of circumstances.
9-0, John. 9-0.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's not going to happen. Anyway.
Let's just hope it lashes rain tonight.
Well, speaking of Welsh Pro 14 teams, one of them had the other Lazarus performance of the weekend. Leinster leading 19-3 with 12 minutes to go. And then we imploded, conceding 3 tries in the final 10 minutes or so. And I was looking through our sides again, just reminding myself, and we had a pretty experienced side. Yes, the bench was weak, I'll grant that, and inexperienced, not weak, but inexperienced. We had a lot of dudes in that team that may not start in the European Cup final, but they have a lot of Leinster caps under their belt. And it was a shame that that we took our foot off the gas. And,
those experienced guys you mentioned got us to 19-3.
They did.
And then they all came off.
Yeah.
And I mean, you got a situation where you've got one team that has everything to play for. It's got European qualification, the whole lot on the line, right? And you've got one team that has its eyes on next week, or this week as it is now. And that was shown. I mean, at 19-3, normally a Leinster team would go on and maybe pop in an old bonus point try or two. But we didn't, because why?
Well, it's unfortunate from a record book's point of view, but in terms of a
It's the only
championship,
place that matters.
in terms of a championship, it means nothing. It's like the last few seasons where we had nothing to play for in the last couple of games and imploded and still came back. I think the year we won our double, didn't we implode against Treviso, and we let a couple of teams beat us in the RDS, but then went on to win a double. So if we go on to win a double, I'll be happy, or even go on to win this week, I'll be happy enough.
I suppose from a motivational point of view, and from Leo and Stuart and the rest of the coaches, it was probably the best result they could have hoped for, insofar as, it kind of gave everyone a kick in the ass and said, well, look, this can happen if you aren't on the game for all 80 minutes, particularly with 3 huge games coming up in the next 3 weekends. So that result leaves us still 7 points clear of Ulster, on 71 points with 14 wins from our 16 games. So we obviously have a huge game tomorrow against Munster. Munster, I think, have a lot riding on this. I mean, I was just looking back over the game. We were talking about it on our WhatsApp group. Like, since we last played since Munster last won the Pro 12 final in 2011, the two teams have played 22 times since. We've won 17, they've won 5. But I suppose more importantly, 3 of those defeats that we've inflicted on them have been semi-finals. So, all of the big games, all of the really crucial, important, not just the run-of-the-mill league games when one team might be missing a few internationals, but the actual matches that are critical for your season, Leinster have won those 3 games. And of course, we're on a 5 in a row. So everything is teed up for a Munster victory.
It kind of is.
It's funny. I mean, a lot of people are saying that Munster have closed the gap on Leinster. I'm not really sure, A, what the gap is, and B, if it is closed at all. I mean, after 2011 final, people said, "Oh, Munster have closed the gap on Leinster." Then Leinster won 4 in a row. Then the next time Munster won, it was, "Oh, well, Munster are closing the gap on Leinster." Then Leinster went and won 4 in a row, and all that kind of thing. The gap between Munster and Leinster is never that big anyway. The gap between any 2 provincial sides in a provincial derby is irrelevant. So I don't know why there's a lot of talk about closing the gap, because quite frankly, the gap isn't a feature. What's a feature is what 2 teams will go out onto the field tomorrow and how they'll perform. We've all got inklings of what teams might be, and if they are what they look like being. It's going to be a very, very close match, but it'll be a close match like all the other games in the last 10, 12 years have been, with Leinster coming out with maybe a 4-point win or something like that. That's the way it's gone. If you were to do the over-under over the last 12 years, that's pretty much how it's gone.
Well, even since we've come back, sorry, John, when we come back from lockdown, the first game, we beat them by 2 points. Then we had the semi-final, beat them by 10. And then finally, we played them in Thomond Park just at Christmas, or just after Christmas. That match was that match postponed? And they played it.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. It was due for the 26th, and they played it at the
played
end.
in January and February.
Yeah. Oh, well, anyway, there was only 3 points in that game. So the kind of the score lines, or the separation between the 2 teams, is quite narrow over those last 3 matches. But as you say, like, we had a lot of starters in the Irish team, a lot of guys that were rotated in and out of the Irish team that may need to be rested, particularly when some might say there's bigger fish to fry. I know, like, a final is still a huge game, and I'm not trying to talk down the importance of winning a final, but they've like, if you take Sexton as an example, he's played 3 high intensity internationals. He's played pretty much 80 minutes for all of those games. He's got a round of 16 game next week. Of course, they lose that game next week, season's over. But I can just see he might be rotated out of that team. I'm not, that would be just my inkling.
I could well see that happening, all right. Although I don't think that playing 3 high intensity games in 2 months is exactly, you're not exactly chained to the oar.
But my point is, Dave, that it would be 6 if they win.
That might be it, all right. But I don't see him starting anyway. I mean, I never thought he would be. I'd say he'd be on the bench. It'll be what'll be interesting is how the 2 teams approach it. As we said, games between the 2 teams. I mean, anything where if there's a gap more than 6 points over the last 30 fixtures between these 2 teams, it's an outlier. It's an unusual match. So I'm going to say it'll be brutal, it'll be tough, it'll be hard, and again, the result will be 3 or 4 points in the difference.
Well, we'll see. Obviously tomorrow. I think we're probably on a loser in this podcast. Trying to
by the time it's published, the teams will be out.
Well, that's my point. If we'd have scheduled this slightly later in the day, we'd know the teams. But for whatever reason, it's 80 minutes away. So by the time you get this onto the internet, the teams will already be out. So probably not worth our time discussing it. My thing, I think I said it last week, was anybody with high minutes, we put them on the bench, and I think that's Sexton and not too many others. Because Furlong didn't have a huge heavy load, and neither did Porter. So which one of them you put on the bench isn't a big deal. I suspect Furlong might be on the bench. That's really it. Have guys like that, James Lowe perhaps, to come off the bench with something to prove might be interesting. And outside of that, we're actually not too bad injury-wise for the time of the year. We have obviously.
There's still a few. Sorry, John. Before you move on, there's a few calls there that they have to make. Like they have to make a call about, say Healy. Healy's played a lot.
Yeah.
So do they pick him or not? You have obviously we're going to miss Ryan. So do they bring in Baird or not? Don't know. Obviously scrum half Gibson Park was away with Ireland for a period of time. Luke McGrath has guided the ship.
Concussion.
Yeah, but he's guided the ship to get Leinster to this point in the season while the internationals were away for 8 weeks or whatever it was. And then you got Robbie Henshaw. Did they I think we're quite skinny in at centre.
Yeah, he's the one. That's the one position that we're really have a worry with is centre. I mean, he's pretty much going to have to start. We're down quite a few. Gary Ringrose being the obvious high-profile one, but we're also down Jimmy O'Brien and
Conor O'Brien.
Conor O'Brien's been out for the season, and there's quite a lot of there's not as many options there. And our backs have been the problem we've had since Christmas in terms of injury.
And Dave mentioned Lowe. I mean, you have to reward Dave Kearney for. He's played. I think he's played 15 games for us this season and scored 10 tries. Like I mentioned, McGrath kind of guiding us there, but the guy who kind of got us a lot of the way there was Kearney's tries. So you have to reward him.
For me, he's sewn into the number 11 jersey and probably Larmour on the other wing. But I suppose after saying we shouldn't waste too much time discussing one's team selection,
but I think
exactly what we're doing.
Yeah, but I think the team kind of picks itself. And I'm happy to have a debate. I prefer to have a debate about potential selection calls rather than just assuming it's going to be one or the other. I mean, these are decisions that I'm sure that the coaches have spent hours discussing in the last few weeks. Few days.
I'd be pretty sure they'll go with Kearney and Larmour with Keenan a fullback. Apart from anything else, the only position where we have kind of a lot of depth is Kearney versus Lowe. Everywhere else, we're a bit skinny on numbers because of injuries to guys like Jimmy O'Brien, inexperience with guys like Max O'Reilly, inexperience with guys like Jamie Osborne. So, to a certain extent, some players pick themselves. I mean, Henshaw plays, whether it's a 12 or 13, I'm not sure. If Frawley was available, I'd pick him at 13, and I'd pick Frawley at 12. I think that works really, really well. I think that obviously Larmour, Keenan, and Carney pick themselves. The big questions in the second row, like you say, do we bring in Ryan Baird? I mean, people have been saying that, Devon Toner and Scott Fardy have looked leggy. No, they haven't. They haven't looked leggy. They haven't. I mean, it's all right to look. I mean, Glasgow, they didn't look that leggy when they were running around, like galloping around like galoots. And it's not as if we're up against the world's most athletic second row combination now, in fairness. I mean, we've got Billy Holland, who's a great player. He's a really great player. But he's a great player at a certain level. And then you've got Jean Klein, who is, the Richard Costello of the 21st century.
But like, there's kind of, you mentioned Billy Holland, like, there is that kind of factor from their perspective that it's, he's as iconic in their team as Issa or Toner or,
absolutely, yeah.
If they come off the bench anyway, it'll probably be Byrne and Klein.
And then you have the CJ factor as well. Like and JJ, JJ's been announced last night that he's making his merry way down to the Massif Central. So there's a few. I suppose with every club there's a churn around this time of year, and players are, coming in, but more importantly, kind of leaving. So they can always kind of, say, no, we'll do this for X player because he's leaving. But like, I suppose CJ was a kind of an iconic player, and Holland is.
We don't know who's leaving Leinster to a certain extent because things aren't announced. So the team, emotion only gets you so far. When the emotions left, you have to have something to base. You still have to have a platform to play on. And we don't know how the Leinster players could be doing it for Scott Fardy or doing it for Deb or doing it for, we don't know who.
Exactly, so, absolutely.
You got to have
Penny before he moves down the M7.
Or Ryan Baird before he goes to Ulster or whatever, I just thought I'd start that rumor there just for the hell of it. So I mean, there's always that kind of stuff. But emotion only gets you so far. If you don't have something to base it on, it actually can be a negative because you can get your emotional energy can be quite exhausting. So, you want to get. I mean, how many times have we got rid of, or not got rid of, but great players moved on after we lost Pro 12 finals? It didn't really work out for us then.
Yeah. Yes, so it'll be a great game to look forward to tomorrow night.
See what Munster do at out half. Actually, you mentioned JJ obviously, and the story is that he's off to play for Clermont Auvergne. I mean, Munster have they've him. Joey Carbery is back and appears to be fit again, and obviously they've got young Healy. So it'll be interesting to see which way they go and which way they go in terms of the 23, not necessarily just the 15. Or do they even attempt to fit both of them in? It
was interesting
Joey Carbery
that Joey didn't play last weekend against, was it Treviso they played?
Yeah.
Joey's going to start. I thought this was teeing up for a Joey versus Harry Byrne for the Irish second person to take over from Sexton spot. However, it would appear that Ross. Again, this will be known before or when this podcast comes out, but it appears that Ross is going to be the 10. But it is kind of teed up for that. I'd kind of like to see that in a way. Maybe Harry is just a few months short of being ready for a big game like this. I don't know.
I think to a certain extent we saw that last weekend that he's still a bit callow. And he maybe he's not quite ready. I mean, it's shocking the way that the provincial coaches pick the team to win the match and not to suit our media narratives. But I mean, would they consider starting JJ at 12 at inside centre alongside Allende? Might be an option.
Or even a fullback.
Plenty
of options of fullback in fairness.
If only they had someone else who could have turned out to be a world class fullback. If only they had somebody like that on their roster.
Well, he seems to be the man in possession anyway. For that's it seems to be the one who talked up as Sexton's on his
to Mike Halley. Mike Halley's played very well for Munster since Christmas. He really has. So, I think that eases any pressure that Van Graan may have felt to move a few deck chairs around. I don't think he will. I think he'll start with Joey. He'll play with the two big lads in the centre because they love that, and Halley will play fullback.
Yeah, and they've also got Matt Gallagher, who's knocking around, who could probably take a 23 jersey or something. We'll
He's
see.
just come back in, hasn't he?
Yeah, he's promising, you know.
Yeah.
But where are they going to fit Zebo in?
They're not going to have the money for Zebo. He's going to want to be able to eat his weight in blancmange every week. So
Come on.
he'll need the big bucks. So I'd say he'll be going where the money is, wherever that is.
I mean, we could be wrong with that, but I don't think there's much inclination amongst. There isn't a huge rush within Irish rugby to find the money to sign him back.
No, well, I mean, if you weren't in the middle of COVID and there was a bit more money about, I could see Zebo fitting into Ulster or Munster. Obviously, he wouldn't play for Leinster because he said that a million times, and Leinster fans might not be happy to have him.
For £5 million, he wouldn't play for Leinster.
Yeah, so he said. But that's fine. I can't fault the guy.
No, I mean, we operate in a provincial system. I mean, guys are loyal to their provinces. It is a very it's a parish GAA thing, and there's nothing wrong with that. People took umbrage with him saying he wouldn't play for Leinster.
No, they didn't.
Not me.
No.
Some people did take umbrage, and I don't see the problem. I mean, the guy is a Corkman. He's a proud, and you know what Cork people are like. Of course, he's going to want to play for his province. I mean, people get upset about lots of things. The things that I get upset about Simon Zebo are, the way he just seems to go wool gathering halfway through games for extended periods of time. That'd be my problem. As a loyal son of Munster, his loyalty to his province, there's nothing wrong with that.
No, not at all. Jerry Flannery would have been another one who swore that he'd never play for Leinster. Just couldn't stomach it. And, great player for Ireland.
And Connacht.
And Connacht. But no, there's a guy who really stuck to his guns and really, really developed as a player throughout his career. It was only injury that really kept him out in the end, calf injury that ended his career.
I wonder if Ronan McCormick ever swear never to play for Munster. It's the only team he didn't.
I think we still not got a full set. We've no player who's
nobody's done the full set in the professional era that I can think of anyway.
It's always been
I
three.
Can't think of anyone.
Keithley did 3. Ronan McCormick did 3. Quite a few did 3. Nobody's done all 4 yet.
No.
Watch this space.
Yeah, so I suppose there's a little bit of other news. Just like obviously the Rainbow Cup seems to be coming around. Still no announcement, but I guess maybe they don't want to take or steal the thunder away from the Pro 12, whatever 14-12 final.
Celtic League final.
What's that?
The Celtic League final.
The Celtic League final.
We just call it that for the time being.
Yeah. So I suppose they don't want to steal the thunder, but
or the Lions tour, thunder of that. That's been announced.
Yes, that's
why
it's so shambolic. They don't want to steal the thunder.
I heard Donald Lenihan talking about the Lions tour, and he obviously he's a former manager of the Lions and a player for them, but he's I'd imagine quite well connected. And he said that basically the Lions tried to look at hosting it here. It was quite expensive to get the stadiums. They were going to be empty, potentially. And so they basically said, they've thrown the ball back to South Africa and said, you organize it, we'll turn up, and up to you to do the logistics, because it's a tour and it costs $7 million to run the team. And basically the home union said, well, we don't have $7 million to invest. Once the UK government said that they weren't going to underwrite the cost of it, the Lions committee kicked it back to South Africa and said, it's your gig and you organize it and you come up with logistics and we'll turn up. So that's what he said. So
yeah, well, that's what they're supposed to do. But I mean, it has left the Rainbow Cup in kind of floating in some kind of stasis at the moment, because we don't really know what's going to happen in terms of where the South African club teams are going to stay, how long they're going to stay for, when the fixtures are going to be released. I mean, the idea of the tournament itself is massively exciting.
I read I think it was on Leinster Fans, I read a couple of days ago, somebody giving out about, oh, the fixtures haven't been out. Like, really, you can't go to them. So who cares whether we play the Blue Bulls or the Sharks on Saturday fortnight? I mean, like,
Yeah, it's
do you
not
know
like you're going to end up
the fact that-
it's not like you're going to go to Pretoria when you should have been in Bloemfontein.
exactly.
You know?
So, like, I mean, like, isn't it not great that our club is playing against some of the best teams
Yeah,
and players in the world? Like, I'm so looking forward to it. And
Yeah, I'm
also,
hugely excited by it. I mean,
let's
as
not
a kid
forget.
growing up and you watch, sorry, Jay, as a kid growing up and you watch Rugby Special on a Sunday, and once a year they have highlights from the Curry Cup final. They have these weirdly named teams with these weirdly named players, and now they're in our league.
Yeah,
but now they're in our league.
exactly.
That's
Yeah, and
very exciting.
and let's not forget that, like, the clubs have no money. Like, there's, you know, some of the back group, not playing staff or coaching staff, but some of the admin staff, commercial, etc., all have been laid off. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's kind of getting down to critical stage now that when South African clubs joined the then Pro 14, like the South African TV companies were paying money to show games. The South African clubs haven't been playing in our league, so therefore South African TV stations haven't had to give out the dot. Once they trigger this Rainbow Cup, I think there's going to be 6 million sterling released to the club, which is vital to keep the show on the road. Like, so, you know, this thing is not just for the fact that, oh, Leinster could be playing against the Blue Bulls in wherever, whether it's in Dublin or in South Africa. More importantly, that there's some cash coming into the coffers of our club to keep it going, that we can go and watch the next year.
Yeah,
Absolutely
agree 100%.
So yeah, bring on the Rainbow Cup in terms of, yeah, it's going to be a warm up for the Lions.
I did think that there was an element of karma, universal karma, in that South Africa had used the Rainbow Cup so often as a threat against Australia and New Zealand, and it was kind of vaporware in that it was never going to happen. And they said, oh, we're going to leave. If you don't give us more money, we're leaving Super Rugby and we're going to Northern Hemisphere. We're going to play in the Rainbow Cup. And he was like, yeah, Chitty reckon, right? And then eventually it happened, and there is a Rainbow Cup, and now the universe is going, well, no, you've used me enough. Now we're going to make a bollocks of your entire schedule, and that's what's happened. I think it's karma.
Maybe.
Could be. Well, anyway, boys, as ever, thanks a million. Thanks very much for watching. If you are following us on Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube, please give us a like, thumbs up, and a subscription. Cheers. Thanks very much.